time to join us today for the Plus Group webinar series. Today's topic is how to sell more life insurance by selling disability insurance. Our presenter is Mr. Steve Brady, National Account Sales Director at the Standard Insurance. Please note that all lines will be muted during the webinar. If you'd like to ask a question, please go to the question pane on your control panel and you can go ahead and type it in. We'll answer the questions at the end of the webinar. Also note that we are recording this webinar. It will be sent to you along with the presentation and the audio in a follow-up email, and you should receive that within 24 hours. So you should receive that tomorrow. Okay, everyone, again, thank you for joining us, and I'm now going to turn this over to Mr. Steve Brady.
Good morning or afternoon, wherever you're located. I appreciate this honor of being able to speak to you. The Plus Group is certainly a dynamic organization, and I am glad to be affiliated with them. They do a very good job across the country. I do want to put a plug in for them. They've got a National DI Day coming up in Disability Insurance Awareness Month in May. So May 5th is their National DI Day, and I would encourage you to participate in that. Disability insurance is certainly the topic of my life. I've been doing this for 35 years. I started as an agent with Northwestern Mutual and went on to wholesaling with Paul Revere, and now I work with Standard in the insurance and home office of this industry. And I've never done anything else, and the topic of today being how to sell more life insurance by selling disability insurance than by selling life insurance alone is one that I've seen put into practice and proven this theory many times over. So I appreciate those who have joined us, and hopefully you'll gain one thing from it. Hopefully one person will be able to make an additional sale today or tomorrow because of what we discussed today. First off, the subject of life insurance is certainly an important one, and selling life insurance has certainly become more competitive than ever before. I just got news that Costco is going to start selling life insurance, and there's always some kind of ad you're getting in the mail or email nowadays for term insurance. And fortunately, disability insurance hasn't gone that route. And disability insurance is still very much a need-driven sale. And the individual who's considering disability insurance, has to be convinced that we're vulnerable, that we have all of our assets tied into our ability to work, and that vulnerability isn't insured. That Social Security or workers' comp or oftentimes even group LTD isn't adequate enough to take care of that risk. And so I'm grateful that this industry is still needs-driven, that we can effectively help people, convince them to buy disability insurance to protect their lives, and then we can, in essence, create a career that really feels good. I was looking at the Wall Street Journal today, and the front cover page of the second section talks about having kind of a world view of your job, of your occupation, and how people are getting more in tune with, it isn't just a paycheck, it's what kind of influence do I have in the world, what kind of impact do I make in the world, what kind of good am I doing in the world. And I thought about this the other day with just what we do with disability insurance. I watched a Frito-Lay truck drive by, and I thought, the driver of that truck probably enjoys his occupation and certainly brings happiness to people and buying snacks. But I feel very good about what we do with disability insurance, and that when people need it most, when their income has fallen because of a disability, we're there shoring them up. And I just feel very good, holistic about that, and hope you all do the same. All right, I'm going to get into a presentation talking about 3 different markets. And so this first screen talks about those 3 different markets and who needs disability insurance really on the outset. And the business owner is obviously the most vulnerable. A business owner, especially a small business, you really can't take the business owner out of the picture and have it still continue. The business is going to fail. And when that's the case, and that's the first question I'll ask, is if you're out of the picture, what happens? And if it feels like that nothing happens, that everything goes on course, then they're not facing reality, or they haven't thought about the question really. But I'll ask the question and say, you know, if you're out of the picture, you know, heaven forbid, what happens? And the business owner is certainly the most vulnerable to the business falling apart. The professional is also a business owner. The professional usually has a trade, you know, whether a doctor, dentist, veterinarian, attorney, plumber, you know, roofer. You know, I consider them professionals in all aspects. You know, their trade is their ability to work, and certainly it falls apart if they're out of the picture. The executive is probably the hardest sale in my mind, because it's hard for them to see the disadvantages of LTD. And when I'm talking executive, I'm talking about any employee who's making $100,000 or more and has group LTD and doesn't realize it's taxable, doesn't realize it's not portable, doesn't realize that the definitions are usually pretty severe. And so waking them up to that environment, if a disability occurs, your standard of living isn't going to be doing fine on 40% of income. You've got to have at least 60% of income take home. And so waking them up to that, those are the key important things to working with an employer-employee situation. Now what I'm going to try and do is share with you some examples of where disability insurance helped people write more life insurance. And then I'm going to show you a presentation that I think is very easy to memorize, very applicable to whatever you're selling, be it Principal or Met or Standard or whatever carrier you're representing, and whatever occupation you're talking to. And so this presentation in the next few minutes is hopefully going to help you today. But let me give you a couple stories. I was given a presentation on disability insurance. This happened to be up in Canada for a group of successful agents who had won a trip, and they had me as a speaker. And one fellow was in the back of the room falling asleep during my presentation, and I generally take that pretty harsh as far as, you know, get my feelings hurt, and so I'm picking on him. I says, yeah, hey, you know, how can you fall asleep while I'm trying to speak? Anyway, he was in the back of the room falling asleep, and I kept picking on him. And at the end of the meeting, he came up to me, and I thought he was going to be upset and mad and chew me out. Older gentleman, probably, you know, 60-something years old, and Jewish, very obstinate, very determined, very focused, and very upset. And he wasn't upset that I kept waking him up. He was upset that I made a promise that he was going to challenge me on. He said, Steve, you told us that we could sell more life insurance if we sold disability insurance. And I'm going to see if you're right about that. I'm going to prove you wrong, actually, but I'm going to try your method. He said, I have never hit Chairman's Club with my company in 35 years. COU, CHFC, I've done everything I can to hit Chairman's Club, hit the top club for life insurance, and I've never done it. And so I'm going to test your theory, and I'm going to see if I can hit Chairman's Club by writing disability insurance, because I've never written disability insurance. And so sure enough, that year we started it off, January, and we started writing disability insurance. And by the end of the year, he had hit Chairman's Club. In fact, he hit it early. He hit it in September because of that opportunity to write more policies with people who already trusted you. And disability is not like medical insurance. Certainly medical insurance is a good door opener for folks, but disability insurance is income related, like life insurance. And when income is gone, then things fall apart. If you don't have health insurance, medical insurance, and you certainly have an outlandish medical bill, you can climb out of that. You can pay that off as time goes by. But if you've lost your income, just like with life insurance, disability insurance is very important. It's the only tool that really replaces it. But what's also advantageous to opening with disability insurance is that disability is a selfish purchase. I buy life insurance because I feel something, love for my wife and my children. I feel love that I don't want to pay certain estate taxes. I feel love that I want to keep things intact in my business. But I buy disability insurance because I'm selfish. I want to still be in charge. I have that male ego that says, I don't want a disability defining me. I want a disability to just be a matter of inconvenience, that it just slows me down a little bit because my disability insurance is lifting my income and I don't have to worry about my standard of living. The other story I wanted to share was a recent Plus Group member who brought to us a very large case. Happened to be a guarantee issue case on a voluntary basis, and 53 out of the 55 potential people bought this disability policy on a guarantee issue basis, which is a very high percentage on a voluntary case. But what it did for the insurance agent with his company is it gave him 53 files, 53 pocketbooks, 53 new people he didn't know before that had a substantial amount of income and that he was able to sell his investment and insurance products to. And it opened the door for him. So those are the two extremes of two stories. One where we one by one sat and visited with people and sold them disability insurance that he was also able to sell life insurance to. And then the other extreme where a large disability guarantee issue case opened the door for all those new pocketbooks. Those are just two of the stories. Let's get into the presentation. When we talk disability insurance, I like to talk about money. Money is what we're fashioned on. Money is what we focus on. Money is what we concentrate on. Money is what we work towards. And I like to talk about money. And then I like to talk about disability. And then I like to talk about peace of mind. And so those are three symbols. They're generic. They can be used with any carrier. But I wanted you to be very comfortable with this presentation. And so let's talk about first the money. I'll ask these questions. How do you earn your money? What is it that you do? Why do you do what you do? Those two questions, how do you earn it and why do you do this, opens up a lot of feelings that they haven't probably ever considered. Well, you know, I do it for this. Why? Why do you do what you do? I am the most curious person as to why people chose their profession that they've chosen. And wait, listen, find out what's in their heart. I've been fascinated by the stories that lead people to do what they do. And then I'll ask, what would you do if you could not do what you do? What would be your dream? Usually in the first two questions I find out their passion. But I ask them, what would be your dream? If you couldn't do what you do and you didn't have to worry about money, what would be your dream? And I wait. I wait to hear the answer. They've never been asked this question, more than likely. And so they'll think about it. I don't know. Well, play with it a bit. What would you do? If you could not do what you do, you've just explained in great detail the passion you have about what you do, how you're special, how you're different, how you're unique, how your career seems to be a calling, how it's tailored just for you, how long you've been doing it, the ups and downs. When people would get out of your career during the downs, you didn't. You've just explained that, your passion. Now, if you couldn't do your passion because of a disability, you didn't have to worry about income, how would you spend your time? And I'm fascinated by their answers. They light up in their face, their eyes. They talk about things that they had buried deep. You know, I'd write, I'd sail, I'd travel, I'd buy a winery, I'd volunteer at the hospital. You find out fascinating things, and I do this for a particular reason. You know, our definition of disability is own occupation, pure own occupation. It's just built in the contract. It's nothing special about it. Most people don't even use it. But if you had to go on disability and you couldn't do your occupation anymore, should you be able to be free to choose something else? Or should you be left in a cage and defined by the disability? And so I tell people, you're cage free. You don't have to sit at home just to collect a paycheck. You could do something else. And if it happened that you do something else and you're good at it, people paying for it, maybe you want to be a painter. That shouldn't harm your disability benefits because you lost the passion, you lost your occupation. So I talk about money and I talk about it that way. The second thing I talk about is disability. And I'm covering 3 different types of disability. There are only 3 types. It's either presumptive, or it's total, or it's partial. But they don't know the word presumptive. They usually don't know the word partial. And so I try to give them words that they would recognize. And so I ask this question. What do you picture in your mind when I say the word disability? And I'll wait. I don't know. And I'll say, just picture it. Let's say just whatever comes into your mind. What is the cause of the disability and what type of disability is it? And 99 out of 100 times they'll say a car accident and I'm confined to a wheelchair. And I'll say, that's exactly what 99 out of 100 people will say. They're paralyzed, usually from the waist down. They're confined to a wheelchair because of a car accident. And that's what we picture in our mind. And so when I say the word disability, that's what you're picturing in your mind. And disability insurance probably seems like a far-fetched idea because not very often does somebody get in a car accident and they're in a paralysis situation. And so if I was to try and sell you disability insurance and that's what you're picturing in your mind is in a wheelchair because of a car accident, you're not going to buy this because you're not convinced you need it. And that's why I'm here to talk to you. That type of disability is called presumptive. It means you're presumed disabled even if you still worked. So if you were in a car accident, you're confined in a wheelchair, and you still worked, and you still made as much money as you make now, we would consider you presumed disabled, presumptive disability, and we would pay you the full benefits regardless. But it's not just limited to a car accident-caused paralysis. If you lost your hearing, if you lost your speech, if you lost your eyesight, if you lost the use of your hands or use of your feet, that's presumptive. And all of those would be paid even if you still worked. You could probably still work if you were blind, as long as you're not a bus driver. You could probably still work if you lost your hearing. If you're a salesperson, we don't listen anyway. But we would still pay you because that's a catastrophic disability, and it may shock you to realize that less than 1% of all disabilities fall into this category. So what you pictured in your mind is less than 1% of what really happens. So the second question is, how difficult would it be to totally disable you? And when I say totally disabled, let's go beyond the car accident and the wheelchair. Let's talk about other things that happen. Heart attack, stroke, back injury. I had a dentist once who was riding horseback, hunting in the Rocky Mountains, and a snake scared his horse, a rattlesnake scared his horse, and reared back and fell and lodged him against a tree. And in so doing, it smashed the lower part of his spine, didn't hurt his spinal cord, but they had to put a metal brace, the lower part of his spine, with bolts holding it. And although he could still ride a horse, he couldn't do dentistry because in that standing position, they call it the barber position, when you're bending over a certain way, excruciatingly painful. So he couldn't be a dentist anymore, but he certainly could do anything else. That's the kind of disability that might totally disable you. what type of disability might slow you down? This is the most frequent disability. If only less than 1% of them are presumptive, the rest are totally and partially disabled, what type of disability might slow you down? And here we'll talk about MS or arthritis. We'll talk about diabetes. We'll talk about things that progressively get worse, cancer. And so I'm introducing sicknesses, whereas before they were focused on accidents. And you may not know this, but accidents and sicknesses generally in the young ages, age 20, 25, 26, they're at the same risk morbidity-wise. The chances of having an accident or chances of having a sickness at that age is exactly the same, but the accident scale stays relatively calm all through life, whereas the sickness just skyrockets, and sometimes it's 10 times more likely to have a disability caused by sickness than accident, 20 times more likely. And so I try to open up their minds as to what disability is beyond what they're thinking the car accident caused paralysis. And I start getting them to think about accidents and sicknesses that totally and partially disable. But I want to focus on this third one, the one that might slow you down. I want to talk about MS specifically. Here's another story. When I was selling, I was focusing on dentists because I found it easy to replace the ADA plan, the American Dental Association plan. I also found it easy to replace the American Medical Association, the CPAs, the ABAs, and the VMAs, the veterinarians, because of one flaw they have in their contract that they still have today, and that is they require total disability before partial can be payable. And I was to meet with a dentist. I was cold calling and had made some appointments, and I was to meet with a dentist. I was early, and I saw a veterinarian's office, and I'd never been to a veterinarian's office before, and it was just before closing, 6 o'clock at night. And I walked in, and I put my card on the table and said, "I'm Steve Brady. I sell disability insurance." And they said, "Oh, that's so great, because we just dropped our policy today. It had skyrocketed premium 360%. I, of course, never would have heard something like that if I hadn't gone in the door and asked. But chances are that they were, that this dentist or this veterinarian bought disability insurance from me, and they gave me 27 referrals of all the people he'd gone to school with. And I'm calling this list of referrals, and I'm talking to them about the AVMA plan that they all have, and I'm doing seminars, and I'm selling, and I'm having a good time, and then I come across one who's just angry and yelling at me and just using foul language, and I'm going, what did I do? What did I do? And as it happens that he's a 33-year-old veterinarian. He had just bought his practice the year before, and he had MS. And he just got contracted with it, and MS, if you don't know, is usually around 30, 33 years old, usually onset. It takes about 10, maybe 15 years to become a total disability. And so I asked him about it, and he said, some days I feel good, and some days it's sporadic. I can't come in at all. And I filed my claim, and they turned me down. I filed it a second time, they turned me down. I filed it a third time, they turned me down. He said, "Steve, not that I hate you, but I hate your profession. You guys sell promises you don't keep." And I said, "I'm really sorry. I can tell you what's wrong with your claim with that carrier, and I can tell you that what I'm selling doesn't have that problem, but I can't help you." And he said, "All right, tell me what's wrong with my claim." And I said, "You have to be totally compensably disabled first before they'll pay you a partial disability, which means the 180-day waiting period you've got has got to be consecutively totally disabled, not going to work at all. And then you've got to get paid another month of total disability, and then you can come back to work." That's how it's worded. That's why it's inexpensive. He said, "Steve, will you warn everybody else? Please tell them my story." And I said I would. So here I am still telling the story. But I focus on MS because it is unpredictable, it is sporadic, it's not something we can say is contagious or hereditary. There's no cure. yet. It's often diagnosed wrong at first, and again, it's partially disabling from the beginning for years. And all of the association plans, the AVMA isn't the only one, the ADA, the AMA, AICPA, ABA are all the same way. So if you've got a professional in those areas, and if they have their association insurance, don't walk away because the premium's less. You know, I had one doctor who was 59 years old, and he had the AMA. His premium was only $1,600 a year, and what I was trying to sell him was $10,000 a year. He said, Steve, I'm not going to pay that much money for it. And so I explained MS and how his AMA would not pay. And he said, Steve, I know people with MS. I've got to work for a lot more years just to take care of what my obligations are. And he wrote a check. It's just needs-based. The last slide is what defines peace of mind. I asked them that. I said, what is peace of mind to you? You've bought this disability insurance, whether it's LTD, whether it's association, or if you're a business owner, you've got workers' comp that you can opt out of. What is it that you're hoping it does for you? What kind of peace of mind? And generally they'll say, if I have a disability, I want it to pay. And so I talk about the exclusions and limitations that are in most plans. And I show them the exclusions. I said, you know, if it's war-related, if it's self-inflicted, if there was something fraudulent about what you said in the application, you know, that's generally, those are the three you've got to worry about. Other than that, you're going to have a covered claim. We talk about the standard of living, keeping the same schools if they've got kids, keeping the same environment, keeping things normal so you can focus not on the disability but on the recovery. And generally I'll say it at the beginning, if with 2% of your time and 2% of your income, I can protect 60% of your income during disability. 2% of their time is a half hour. And that's the time you've given me today is a half hour of your life. Half hour of your time, and I appreciate that. But I hope that this 2% of your time you're able to take to others. Talk to them about their money, their passion, their dreams. Talk to them about partial disability, and get on the same level with them as far as what they already think about presumptive and car accidents and paraplegic. Get them past that. You've got to expand their mind and start becoming personal. Pretty soon they'll know somebody that's got cancer or has lupus or Lou Gehrig's or something that has slowed them down and changed their world. And often you can ask, how has it changed them? And usually it's not a good experience. Usually it's changed them. An independent male especially becomes very bitter and very angry during a disability because now they're reliant upon others, whereas they were the hunter and gatherer before. And so we talk about those things, those soft topics that are very important. So those are the three symbols. Those include the three types of disability. Those are the three markets: executives, professionals, and business owners. Let me give you one last story. I was calling a list of recently graduated dentists. And I talked to one dentist, and he said that I was the 21st agent to call him that day, but the first one to talk about disability insurance, and that's what he wanted to talk about. So I sold him disability insurance. He also bought a significant amount of life insurance. And I thought, you know, those other 20 agents that called him that same day all were licensed to sell disability insurance, but they didn't lead with that. They led with life insurance, and that's not what he wanted to talk about. And I found that very interesting. And so I have helped a lot of people sell more life insurance by selling disability insurance than by selling life insurance alone. I hope that this helps you. We're going to open this up for questions. And I hope you have great careers. I love what you do. I love who you are because of what you do. Nobody can buy disability insurance unless somebody sells it to them. And none of us carriers can survive without you selling disability insurance to them. And we appreciate the Plus Group. There's nothing like it. They're independent wholesalers. They represent all the carriers. They teach, they train, they lead, and they're our customers. So we appreciate what they do and your work through that. So, Tracy, I'll turn this back to you.
Steve, thank you. Again, if you have any questions, please go to the question pane on the control panel and type it in. If you have any questions, please go to the control panel and type them in. Okay, Steve, explain the difference between ONOC and modified ONOC, please.
ONOC is cage-free, and so modified ONOC would be somewhat of a cage around your disability. And typically a modified ONOC will say, you can do something else, but if you make X amount of money, and usually it's 100% of your previous income, then they're going to start reducing your benefits. Your occupation would be, you can't do your occupation, but if you choose to do something else, then they're going to reduce your benefits, probably to a partial disability. And any occupation, which is like Social Security, means you're disabled from any occupation, which means that you can't do anything. If you can walk into the Social Security office, you'll be turned down, and I've seen that happen. So your definitions are on a spectrum, any occupation being the worst, and your occupation, you have a choice. If you're disabled, you can stay home. They can't force you to do something else. And sometimes companies put a 2-year limit on that, or 5-year. Most will say, to age 65. Then a modified ONOC, which says if you do something else, there's a limit as to how much money you can make doing something else. And then a pure ONOC, where there's no limit. Does that help?
Sounds good. Okay, next question, Steve. What's your segue from discussing disability to life insurance?
Generally, I talk about income. And when we've talked about the need of how much tax-free income they have or need for disability insurance, which is usually about 60%, I'll then ask, does your life insurance provide 60% of your income tax-free, and how long does it? And so they'll generally say, I've never thought about that. I've got X amount, and so we'll just do the math. Your life insurance is going to come in tax-free as it is, and so let's just see how long that lasts. And so you've got 3 years here. You've got 5 years. That's one way. Another way I've done it, and I didn't expect to talk about this today, is that I'll talk about disability insurance, and I'll say, the one problem with disability insurance is if you're not disabled, you've paid this premium and none of it comes back. And how would you like to see a return of your premium? And so what I'll do is I'll take a life insurance product, a permanent life insurance product. I'll use the premium for the disability as a flat extra rate, and I'll do a search to get a certain cash value at age 65, so that I've got all my life premiums and my disability premiums enough in the cash value to give them at the end of that period when the disability drops off. And so I've sold some life insurance on top of the disability insurance with the advent of a return of premium.
Okay, next question, Steve. Do you generally pay the premium through age 65?
Yes, that's 2 questions there. The premium is through age 65. In fact, you can keep it for life nowadays with most carriers. If you're working at least 30 hours a week, you can keep your disability policy. It'll end up being a 2-year benefit period, but for the rest of your life. The second question in there, the benefit period is usually age 65. I'll show that first, age 67 or whatever it is that your carrier provides. I'll show that first, but they'll also talk about the 2-year and the 5-year and the 10-year. And I'll talk about, you can get this for less money, but if you look at the premium for the 2-year is exactly half of what the premium is to age 65. And so the actuaries have found out that most disabilities, in fact half of them, only last 2 years. And so if you wanted to buy a 2-year benefit period, you're covering half of the disabilities out there. Unfortunately, you can choose your disability insurance, you can't choose your disability, and so that other half, those half that go beyond the 2 years, you're exposed for. And so I generally will show age 65 and explain with all the riders, here's the Rolls Royce. Let's trim it down to fit your budget, but at least I want you to see what's available to you.
Okay. Next, are you certain that the AVMA and the Dentist Association and AICPA plans are still worded that total disability is required before partial kicks in?
Yes, I'm still aware of that. We do competition on their current stuff, and the AMA, ADA for dentists, AICPA, ABA, and the AVMA are still the same. They still require total disability first, and it's the biggest hidden secret out there, and I'm so frustrated by that. But I wouldn't let premium stop you. I wouldn't focus on presumptive or own occupation or anything else. I would focus on just one thing, and I focus on MS. That's the one I'm most familiar with. But whatever their passion is, arthritis or cancer or whatever it is, it's a partial disability that at least goes for 10 years. It could be diabetes. I've watched that one take its toll. And when they understand that I'm there to make them uncomfortable, I'm there to make their blood pressure go up. I do seminars on these plans, and I'll sit a bunch of veterinarians together, or dentists or whatever, and say, my job is to get your blood pressure up because what you've got is not good enough, and I need to make you uncomfortable before you'll make a change. And so we'll talk about MS, and I'll let them tell me stories. And I'll say, do you understand that that would not be a claim? And again, you can choose your disability insurance. You can't choose your disability. I'm not saying you're going to have MS, but if you did, and your claim was denied 3 times, and now you're stuck for 10 years, you can't go buy something else, how upset are you? I'd rather you got a little mad now than the consequences later.
Okay, are there any other questions? If you do have some questions after this, please feel free to reach out to your local Plus Group office. I'm sure they can assist you. Steve, thank you for a great presentation. Thanks to you and the Standard. We appreciate your time, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Please check out our website at www.plusgroupus.com or contact your local Plus Group office for more information. Also, as Steve mentioned, the Plus Group's first National DI Day will be May 5th of this year. We'll keep you posted on the information regarding that. So again, Steve, thank you, and thank you to everybody for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.